Welcome to Biztech's CEO Conversation Show, the show where we engage industry leaders to share insights into how they run and grow their organizations. Today, our conversation is with Sri Ambati, the CEO and co-founder of H2O AI. H2O AI is an open source machine learning platform that makes it easy to build smart applications, and it's headquartered in San Francisco in the Silicon Valley. Now, Sri, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having us.
Now, Sri, before we start, please give us an overview of H2O AI and your history as you've started the business.
H2O is the leading AI cloud platform, and we have been a movement in data science and machine learning. More than 1 million data scientists use our open source platform, H2O. And 20,000 organizations use us across a variety of verticals. Any payment system you see today, whether it's PayPal, Alipay, Apple Pay, MasterCard, or all the major banks on the core risk modeling, are all using H2O at the heart of their payment systems and risk modeling. Almost every underwriting insurer today uses H2O at the core. Some of our major banks have been early partners for us. They have led our funding rounds, and we're a company of about 300 people globally, and the home to the world's best AI talent and best AI platforms. So think of us as the company that is on your side, on the customer side, to take them through the journey of climbing AI peaks, and we climb that every day up and down like Tenzing Sherpas, and we are here to make sure our customers can go and transform their companies to AI superpowers.
Now, Sri, what makes H2O AI unique? Because you mentioned that there's been strong adoption from the very beginning from the financial services industry. Why is that?
Financial services has the most if you will, quantitative acumen applied right now. So in other organizations, you have marketing organizations within a larger, let's say a retail company that's going to have same level of quantification, but banks are the original data companies. And they have been historically in a kind of asset light organization. For them, math and accuracy and predictions and time speed of those predictions was super important. And I think it was natural for us to find a foothold in the banking industry.
And to give us insights into how customers use your products and services, could you walk us through some use cases of how your products are being used, and also the desired outcomes as a result of that, and how that has transformed these organizations?
Yeah, let's start with some of our customers. I mean, during COVID, as you could imagine, almost all models were stress tested, and people had to rebuild their thinking about how to acquire customers, how to retain them, which banks, which small, medium businesses to give loans to, which route to take if you're delivering, if you're UPS. Every route that you're delivering during the pandemic had to be rebuilt, and H2O was powering some of those supply chain disruption. Reckitt was literally asked us a question on how much Lysol or Dettol to ship into Malaysia versus shipping to South America, or Walgreens, CVS's of the world are looking at how many flu shots to have in every corner store. Discover, MasterCard, we're trying to prevent fraud. Bill.com, one of the customer of ours, trying to look at invoices and automatically processing them using AI. Typically, customers are saving millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And in AT&T case, they saved $1 billion in preventing fraud. Fraud prevention, as businesses went online, there was more prone to e-business and online fraud. And so our algorithms were fighting fraud, but also helping them look at customers that they can bring to table, underwriting costs, lending costs. When someone applies for a mortgage, time to create a go, no go decision, we've reduced that time for many of our customers, processing their documents, a lot of our customers are looking at trying to kind of either optimize their operations during COVID, or after COVID, how do you roll out offers, loyalty programs to acquire the top high net worth customers. In insurance, hurricanes have played havoc, so people have shifted which property to underwrite, to which person. To the height of an apartment, for example, became more valuable because of hurricanes than zip code in some places. And the pandemic created a new diaspora, if you will, of people living in the cities going into the suburban places, changing real world and how they procure things. The local Walmarts and Walgreens had to stock completely different items that otherwise would have been only available in Manhattan. So business as we know it has changed. And I think that's where our models are powering most of these changes, and letting businesses make experiments faster, cheaper, and easier. So the cost of an experiment goes down, they can do more experiments and increase the learning rate of their organizations.
You know, Sri, I want to add a little bit to that. And I think this is a little plug to companies like yourselves, actually. So on a different show, and you can check it on our website, as well as our various other platforms, we interviewed the CIO Association of India. And they did a survey around 15 financial services institutions in India. And one of the things is how the pandemic impacted the way they interacted with their customers. And one of the things that came out very strongly in that interview was the use of AI and other technologies, which then resulted in the banks and insurance companies actually getting to know their customers a lot better on one side of the equation. But on the other side of the equation, their net promoter score actually went up because they were actually delivering better service to their customers. And you know, in India, Shri, you're probably very familiar as well with the fact that you've got world-class companies and you've got companies which are really behind the curve. And this was a very interesting insight, that all their scores went up because they were using technology. And the AI was one of the things that they used, and they saw value in it because it really helped them to understand their customers better.
The heart of that is to personalize, right? So AI's true offering to the world is personalization, right? Whether you're recommending some of the earliest AI companies, like let's say Amazon or Google, they've essentially they wanted to predict the book you are likely to buy before you know which book to read. That kind of recommendation engines were at the heart of Netflix. These were the earliest adopters. Some of our earliest customers were like LinkedIn or Netflix or Google, or even PayPal and eBay, where people were trying to understand how to price something, and which merchants to score higher, which users to make an offer to, or which users were colluding to create to fraudulently. And I think all of these understanding of groups, understanding of graphs, understanding of people and how they work together, and societies at large. The other key piece H2O has been able to achieve, because of the focus we had, was to try to democratize, in addition to democratizing credit, democratizing AI for banks, which democratizes credit, but then the democratizing of AI to help healthcare costs go down. So we've been working with hospitals during the COVID crisis to reduce attrition of nurses, predicting ICU transfers, and also clinical trials, rare therapies that you can apply, and see organ failure prediction, and then of course the long-term manageable diseases like diabetes and other, where H2O is being used to understand what kind of management treatments can lead to better outcomes.
And also this means better outcomes financially as well as physically, isn't it?
That's right. Health is the only wealth, right? So our core customer base, life insurance, insurers in property and casualty, and finance, and are connected through health. the number one reason an American citizen goes bankrupt is because of poor health. And that's true. That's what we learned globally, that health is the true wealth. And I think for democratizing health, we've actually made that a mission. I started the company to kind of increase machine learning and software access for health and research in fighting cancer. I think over the years that has really panned out today. Almost all Hospital Corporation of America, Kaiser, United Health Group, several of the government and community health institutions use H2O. And when the Delta wave hit India, we were predicting the second wave, and we prepared ourselves to be able to be there to help with oxygen supply demand that was really very choppy during the time. And we created a supply chain across from China to India to rural towns, tier 2 and tier 3 cities and towns, to be able to ship oxygen where it was needed just in time. So I think being able to predict what is coming allows us to prepare as a society, as a country, as a world, for changes that are happening much more rapidly these days.
Now, Sri, I want to take you up on your democratizing AI mantra. How is that going to, so on the large enterprise space, we have adoption. We have an understanding that AI is the way to move forward for better customer service, better outcome, better profitability. How are you democratizing AI for then smaller companies? How do they get involved? I mean, do you have a cloud product? I mean, you have a hybrid cloud. Tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks for that question. The company's core ethos is to allow maximum freedom for our customers and make them AI first. So our open source reaches such a wide audience, right? Sort of long before we reached Africa or Australia, our software already got deployed, is being used. There's a strong community. H2O is the #1 skill set for data scientists and AI, according to O'Reilly survey. And the salaries, H2O skill set is much more in demand than, say, a PhD in physics. And I think the idea is that we are able to through open source, create such great talent pool for small, medium businesses to also be able to access and do AI and use our open source or use our AutoML to get that same level of algorithms that otherwise were locked in for the top companies in the world. Now, the second piece is with automatic machine learning, we're able to mimic, we have the world's top talent, the grandmasters, just like chess has grandmasters, AI has grandmasters. There are only 240 grandmasters in the world, and H2O is home to 10% of them. And we've also made some of our data scientists turn them into grandmasters as well. So in some sense, we have the ability to make greatness inside the company.
Now, Sri, this is interesting. I've never heard of this term AI grandmaster and the fact that there's only 240 in the world. How does one become a grandmaster?
So there used to be a company called Kaggle, which has been acquired by Google. And what they do is they go to customers and create competitions out of the business problems. And then these competitions are competed fiercely globally by about a million, now about many millions of data scientists. And if you win 5 gold medals, and some of them in personal single category, not just teams, that's when you end up becoming a Kaggle grandmaster. And we have more grandmasters than any continent, and more #1 top data scientists than any company in the world. And I think what we've done is we mimicked them carefully in software. So in other words, these grandmasters are actually product designers at H2O, and they're creating these recipes that allow to mitigate error or common pitfalls in making models. And the second piece is they're also building software that automatically looks at a problem and recommends the right models, the right features, the right alternative data sets to bring. And so it reduces the cost of doing and making AI. And then the software then automatically takes the scientific model and spits out software that it auto-generates software called inference engines or scoring engines that get embedded into applications. So that's kind of where the AI App Store comes into place. The AI Cloud automates this end-to-end model building. The AI App Store, which is pre-built set of models, pre-built set of features or insights, and pre-built set of applications, allows small, medium businesses to take a churn prevention application, connect their data sources, and start scoring themselves against their customers for great customer experiences, or taking these world-class fraud features and applying it to their businesses with a short amount of time. So that kind of time to market, ability to use pre-built models or build models at the scale of a grandmaster, and reduce their underwriting cost, reduce their, if they're a bank or lending, or reduce their cost of customer acquisition, or improve their COGS. If they're a services company, they're able to take our software and essentially use it like hundreds of data scientists. So essentially the cost, time, ability to build models, deploy models, and manage and monitor them, that whole innovation cycle becomes very fast. So small and business can actually today go to cloud.h2o.ai and play with the platform, pick the applications that are relevant for them, and start using it.
Now, Sri, that sounds really exciting. AI has a lot of benefits, but there's also a sinister side to AI that has been sensationalized in the movies, which is in the back of the mind for a lot of the general population. Early adopters have gone in and adopted AI wholeheartedly, seeing its benefits. Now, you have been actively engaged in responsible AI and AI for good initiatives. Tell us about what you're doing in that space.
So for us, explaining AI is very, very important, right? So anything that someone cannot explain, then probably we do not know that very well, right? So being able to take the kind of the decisions that the black box models are doing and deconstruct them in ways one can understand, especially when all models are wrong and some models are useful. So how do we know when the model was making a informed guess or informed insight that is counterintuitive to the business users or experts? And how do we know when it's actually wrong? Right, so those are the places where we try to test the models with adversarial tests. We create tests to see, well, is this model biased against a particular race? Is this model biased against gender? And try to test the model around. And historically, what we found was that centuries of decisions have captured in the data what is centuries of social challenges, right? And so what we need to do is just go and improve the data assets as well. So the bias is captured in the data, and then bias in the models. Models amplify it, and software can
exactly. So how do you then either reduce bias or eliminate bias? So if, perhaps to certain ethnic groups or certain socioeconomic groups.
Yeah, with enough. So we are an open source company, and the core philosophy of open source is with enough eyeballs, all problems are shallow, right?
Yes.
And so in the same way, with enough eyeballs, all bias can become shallow by actually exposing kind of where the models are, have their blind spots, and start augmenting other models around those blind spots and amplifying the unbalancedness in the data, and start making changes in the data that feeds into the algorithms that produce the models. So interpretability as a whole, we need to take it as a entire life cycle process of making AI and deploying AI and applying guardrails around the actual decisioning, so that you actually can look at trigger alerts when you see things that humanly feel different, and they want to rebuild those feedback loops. The ultimately data has statistical bias, and it's necessary to actually show the signal. It's not easy to, one cannot eliminate bias because there will be a statistical bias there. So what one should do is essentially the opposite. Try to mitigate it or identify when it's happening, and then change the software. Historically, when bias happened with human intelligence, you had to change someone's mind, which is really harder. But it's software, you can go change the software, and then you can rebuild the models. And we found, like historically, the data that was fed into most of the traditional ImageNet models or traditional models that have been built in the last 10 years, there's natural language processing. There's a inherent bias in that got amplified from the data. And so what we are doing through open source is expose some of that. And the way people keep intelligent people in check is with more intelligent people or other intelligent people. So social construct, when you have a model, artificial intelligence can be kept in check with more AI to explain AI to put guardrails in AI and manage AI. And so you end up using something as sophisticated as machine learning to keep other machine learning models in check.
Now, Sri, that's been fascinating. So at least I think for a lot of people that is heartwarming, because everybody is so concerned about how these models could basically take a very ugly turn. But I want to zoom us in on now the Asia Pacific region and how H2O AI is deploying across the region. Tell us your thoughts in terms of where you see the strongest adoption, and what are your plans for the APAC region?
Yeah. And I want to also touch base on the AI for good question that you had asked when you talked about the bias part. In Asia, we started with AI to fight bushfires, right? And in Australia. And it's a part of the global program we have now to fight wildfires or understand the behavior of wildland fire and how it will grow. H2O is also free for all wildlife protection, wildlife. Poachers use extensive AI to understand which tasks they can sell into or they can capture and pass by as the 1980s era tasks. And so what we've done is deploy AI to protect wildlife and pets against such challenges. We've built a pandemic supply chain that predicts the surges of pricing, and AI for mapping the ocean seafloor. We're working with some whale researchers in the region to actually be able to deploy floats that can look at the map of the ocean floor. Obviously, AI for education. Our platforms are free for all education purposes in all universities. It's taught in most of the Californian universities, in Stanford and UC, CMU, Chicago, as well as major universities here and the IITs in India. And we expect that to be widely studied in other parts of the world as well. But I think fundamentally, the recovery from COVID will need a more digitally savvy governments. And so we're beginning to work closely with public sector globally to make sure they have the world's powerful AI technologies to essentially deliver world-class services to their citizens, smart nations, AI nations. We expect AI to be deployed on the edge on both to protect life when sudden disasters and hazards happen. So I think the general, the AI for good, H2O started with the ethos to do good with the world's powerful technology. And by democratizing it, we're able to be there where it's needed. And in Asia itself, you probably preempted earlier to saying what are some lessons you would be learning. We didn't come early into Asia. We came quite recently, actually. But we found that our open source had reached many places already. And we found many of the banks started using our platforms. Commonwealth Bank of Australia obviously started playing with our platform, and we became a customer and now led our Series E and started deploying it organization-wide. I think that's the big, Ping An is a customer of ours and also an investor from the previous round, and we're deployed in Ping An Bank, Ping An Insurance, and we're rolling out into the greater region there. Singapore is one of our core base. We started building partnership with DBS, local kind of public sector, as well as rolling it out into the retail sector and real estate there. And Japan is the other place where we're seeing a pretty strong traction. We've also built some decent locally with Malaysia as well as Indonesia. We're seeing some good traction for healthcare related work and the banking industry.
Now, Sri, you just mentioned your Series E funding with Commonwealth Bank of Australia. But basically, you're well into your unicorn status right now. Could you tell us, looking back at your entrepreneurial journey, what are some of the main things that you think you've done right into growing this business as quickly as you have into unicorn status?
I think, well, we don't think we're as fast as some of the other companies that have hit that milestone, but we're taking the time that it's needed to build a fundamentally solid business. And obviously, valuations are interesting, but value creation is more important. And so we think that fundamentally we focused on the customer, right? So making sure customers are at the front and the center and at the core. Think of customers as the children of the companies, of startups. What you're looking at, my backdrop is actually all customer contracts, right? So we focused on customers, obsessed with them and listening to them all the time, right? Continuous feedback loops. When you think of creating an AI first organization, it's really about continuous feedback loops. If you can connect the feedback loops from what the customers are thinking or saying, and then out innovating the market before others are listening to the same thing. So you can continuously innovate and be ahead of the curve and drive create the overall market for AI. We were the first or second .ai domain. So when we said AI in the early part of the decade, many companies would shy away from AI, much like the Hollywoodification of AI at the time, right? But I think what you see now is actually a consistent innovation cycle, which has led to, we started with ML, which I think is more like an assembly language for AI, to auto ML, which is more compiling good machine learning methods, to then the cloud, which allows for further democratization. And then apps, which are AI first applications. Now customers can consume them directly, just like people can consume a cell phone better with an app store. Everyone is going to create their own app stores and roll it out to their customers. We're beginning to see co-creation with our customers, which means that trusting the customer and the customer building that trust on us. The second concept of building trust in AI, whether through openness, open source, through creating tools for explaining AI, to also building trust in our brand and our business, and building communities. That way we actually were able to kind of go in and be with the customer as he's going through that journey. A lot of people talk about entrepreneurship, right? But intrapreneurship, which is bringing change in large organizations, is probably much harder. And so what we've done is early adopters, we made sure we were with them through that journey. And when they're bringing that change in one organization, how do we connect them to the C-suite so you can bring change across the organization? The challenge with AI is no longer one of technology. It's a cultural transformation for most businesses. They need to be able to bring data-driven decision-making, which is sometimes counterintuitive to business as usual, and experts in the company, which means that senior leaders have to weigh in on these agile processes and thinking that's happening, the experimentation that's happening, and let those experiments play out. And oftentimes the surprises that come back can be much larger. So the cultural change that of listening to the data and allowing feedback loops to kick in within my own business, and allowing conflict as a feature, not a bug, and resolving that conflict with new innovation within our organization led to similar mimicking. Same things were happening with our customers, where the data scientists were at odds with the business units or with the data teams or the IT teams, but the data science, letting the voice of the data speak loudly, so that it gave us different ways of looking at our own business. And so we would say start with the data first. In God we trust, everyone else bring data.
Now, Sri, it's been a fascinating conversation. But before we end this conversation, any final thoughts or sagely words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with?
AI is just still in very early stage of adoption, right? But at the same time, the companies that get to AI, everyone who is thinking they're competing against a bank or an insurer or other hospitals are really competing with the technology transformation that's happening across the entire landscape. Tech giants, fintech companies and giants are encroaching into core business as usual. And AI is a super weapon on the side of business leaders to go take on the tech giants, as well as changes happening in their own businesses. AI is a force for good as well. And we purpose to the age of great resignations, right? By building purpose into the organization at the core of it means that you can retain and attract amazing amount of talent. And then that talent can go and help your customers and your businesses simultaneously. And lastly, AI will take away all the mundane aspects of living, right? Sort of human beings are also processes. They said human beings, so it's a verb form. And that means that we as humans can get better and can be more of a spiritual machines, not just mechanical in our day-to-day. If AI takes away a lot of that basic stuff, then we can do more of the stuff that makes us love more and change the planet faster. And that kind of emotional kind of quality that humans are good at is what gets amplified once AI takes away the boring, mundane stuff. They're allowing us to be better humans, right, globally. And more than ever now, post-COVID, we will see that we need to rebuild those partnerships across the globe. And you're doing that, Brian, from Silicon Valley to Asia and vice versa. And that borderless thinking, while it was frozen during the COVID era, where everything became localized, everything became misinformation silos, prosperity silos. I think breaking that barriers again in a borderless fashion where the best ideas can thrive and businesses can learn from each other's best ideas. That ecosystem thinking of raising a forest, not just a tree, is going to revitalize the entire planet. And we are super excited at how AI will be core to that journey for all of us. So looking forward to interacting with your audience again on the same topics.
Sri, thank you very much. It's been a very insightful conversation with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having us.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Sri Ambati, the CEO and co-founder of H2O AI on Biztech's CEO Conversation Show. This video and podcast will be on various social media platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.